Okay, so this is our Ask the Witches for our Pagan Fest, and this is our panel of witches. And if everybody wants to take a moment to introduce yourselves, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Allie.
I'm Angie.
I'm Cleo.
I'm Joe.
I'm David.
And then there's Jolene.
Sorry, I don't know if it hurt the first time.
I heard you. You introduced yourself.
And then I'm Solaris, of course. So we have questions that we have all been asked that we're going to answer for Ask the Witches. And let's get started. We'll start with Allie. Go ahead.
So maybe we can start with the basic one. How do I start? How do I start as a witch or a pagan?
The one thing I've learned in my experience is read. Do your research on everything. If there is anything that you have doubts on, that you are absolutely not sure about, read. Talk to more experienced witches. Everybody's experiences will be different, but your best bet is to just do plenty of research. I've been doing research since I was 16, and I just barely started practicing about 4 years ago. So,
Angie?
Is it the same question?
Yeah, same question.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I just continue to do my research and continue to read and study. Don't be afraid to jump into it. Don't ever be afraid to jump into it. You're never gonna do it wrong. And there, nothing is, even if something happens, you feel that you do something wrong, it's okay, because nothing's gonna happen. It's fine. Nothing's gonna jump out and say boo. It's okay. Take a deep breath and you learn. Every step that you take, you learn from it, and it's okay. It's in that's your journey that you're doing. And for me, everything that I do, I'm learning. I've been doing this for a while now, and everything that I'm doing, I'm learning. And I'm continually reading and learning and reading new books. And so I would say just continue to read and study and take in everything that you can.
Thank you.
Miss Cleo?
When I first decided this was a path I was interested in, as the other gals have said, I feel like reading was really important because it gave you the basics of what was going on. Someone did recommend to me Scott Cunningham because he's sort of basic, and I think it was kind of easy to start out with that to sort of get a background as to what things were. And then I got into a lot more comprehensive reading once I knew what to look for. I don't think you can do anything wrong because everybody's take on it is different. It's such an individualized practice. And it was really interesting to me because the first real spell I did that worked because it was something, my husband had brought a ghost home with him when he went on a trip. And he was dreaming every night about this person that was this ghost he encountered. And so I just got up one night out of bed and took my Aetham and just...
She did it naked, and it scared the ghost away.
I ended up doing a thing around our bed and told the woman that she needed to go find her own husband in her own time and leave. And she did. He didn't have any dreams after that. So it's something where I think intention, sometimes you'll surprise yourself. It's the intensity of emotion sometimes that will bring something to the forefront and make it work. So you
Yeah.
need to trust yourself and do things that you think are important.
Thank you.
Where do you start? I would say start with what you want. I mean, most of the people who get into paganism or witchcraft, they want to change. They want something to be different. So that might be a change in the world, that you want to get into a better house or a better relationship, or that might be an internal change. You know, I want to have less anxiety, or I want to be more in touch with the divine or a particular spirit. But that desire, that want, is the starting point, I think. And then you go find a way to make it happen. And there are a couple of aspects to that. There are a couple pieces. One is the real world. You say, I'm going to go and take these steps to make this thing happen. But then also you say, I've got magical things that I can use to support that. So do I burn incense? Do I put together a spell bag? Do I say a prayer to a particular deity? I think that when you start looking at where do I begin or where do I pick this up, you start with what is it that I want and how do I get there? And what are the magical steps that I can put in place to help me get there?
Thank you.
I would agree with everything that everybody has already said. And one of the best books that I've found to start with is by Joyce and River Higginbotham. It's called Paganism, An Introduction to Earth-Centered Religions. This one. Sorry, there's a glare. There you go. And that one is a really good, almost academic beginning to know what just everything is. And then from there, you can pick what interests you and what your goals are, and but gives you an understanding of everything in general. So I would start with that one.
How to get started, I would say start small. Everybody has had most everybody understands who's been down the path for a while, that research and that reading component are incredibly important. So I would say don't neglect that aspect of it in the beginning. That part might last you a year or 2 years or 5 years, before you're ready to move to the next step. And so getting started involves that beginner reading component. And if you neglect that part of it, sometimes you might have to go back and make sure that that's part of that starter information, because the Miss Cleo or Pandora, she mentioned like the Scott Cunningham. Those are wonderful books to kind of ease your way into the concepts of witchcraft and ritual, and kind of learn some of the language that is kind of part of whether it's paganism or Wicca. And then the book that Joe mentioned, the paganism, earth-based religions, that is a wonderful, it's not teaching you how to do witchcraft the way that the Cunningham books are, but it is teaching you about paganism and about kind of what your choices are. So I would say read everything, no matter what it is, even if it's bad. Read it, and you can start to learn like what feels right to you, what resonates for you, and what you want to throw out. And it's okay to throw out some of the things and keep some of the other things. You don't have to be married to the entire book in order to get something good out of it. So start there, and then I would say once you're feeling ready, I mean, a lot of people put off doing any kind of real practice because they're not sure they're going to get it right. And I think that you have to just kind of take that leap for yourself and just do your first spell. Like, Pandora was saying, she just got up out of bed in the middle of the night, and Dan the Old says she was naked. We don't know. There's no proof. But she just got out of bed and she just made it happen. Like, she had a need, like David was saying, there was a real need and a want to make that happen. So sometimes it's just when the opportunity presents itself, that's the time for you to try it out for the first time. But it could be something really small. It could be setting up your altar for the first time. That's a way to kind of dip your toes in. There's not a whole lot of, it's not too scary. You can't really get it wrong. You could maybe call quarters for the first time if you do quarters, or if you wanted to call a circle. You could go out under the full moon and do a small little ritual, or you could burn some incense. These are all like little baby steps toward like that practice, but it takes just one little thing to get you started and give you some confidence, so you know it's not so scary and it's not so foreign to you, and then you can go on to the bigger things.
Thank you. That was very nice.
Thank you.
That actually takes us into the next question, which is, what if I mess up? What if I get it wrong? Or what if I do the wrong thing? Like, what's going to happen to me? Allie, do you want to field this one? Start us off with this one?
What if you mess up? In my personal opinion, it all depends on the size of the spell. Like, years ago, my very first spell didn't work as well as I'd liked it to. It was somebody wanted me to do a love spell for them, and since I was still a baby witch, I didn't know that was a big no-no. I did it for her, and then about a month later, some very, very, very bad things happened to her in the love department, and so I know better now, but it was for her, so there wasn't any big repercussions that I saw for myself, because I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need to do something like that for myself, and I don't see myself doing something for myself like that, you know. But the best thing you can do, in my personal opinion, depending on how big it is you can either try and do another spell to fix it, but sometimes that's just a cluster and it can mess things up even worse, or say, I messed up, I know better next time.
Yeah, that's great. Angie?
Well, I've always looked at it like you live and you learn. And when I do spells, I always think about it first and say, okay, is this a good idea? Before I do a spell, I make sure I'm not pissed. I make sure, I make sure that I'm in the right mindset, because you never want to do any spell when you're not in the right mindset, because that's never a good idea. You want to make sure you're in the right mindset. And you want to always be clear of what you're doing and have a clear mind, so you understand what you're doing. And so I want to make sure, I want to put my words the right way. So you don't mess up. Because if you just throw it out there and just say, oh, I don't care what happens, then you're not doing the responsible thing. And when you're doing spells, you need to be responsible. Because it's kind of the karma thing. Some witches believe in it, some don't. And if you believe in it, then you want to be careful. That's how I look at it. And if you're not in the right mindset, then you shouldn't be doing spells. That's just how I look at it. So
Thank you.
Miss Cleo?
I think that were I to have done something that came out not the way I wanted it to, like Allie mentioned, I would first try and see if there was anything I could figure out that might help in unwinding what I did. If not, I think I would perhaps appeal to a god or goddess that was most prevalent to what I might have done, and see if they couldn't at least direct it to not do harm or to go where it wasn't intended to go. And from that, I would certainly learn to be a little more directed in what I did so that I did not make the mistake.
Thank you.
I guess I'm up next. I think that you're going to mess up. I think that when you start down a path like this, there are going to be things that you do. We can't see perfectly ahead. We don't know everything. And sometimes even the best intentioned work can go sideways. So I think it's okay to give yourself permission to mess up. And like Angie said, with that responsibility, the other side of that is that you accept the consequences of what happens. So my experience of those consequences can range from nothing happens. You know, you mess up your spell and the worst that can happen is nothing. It just fizzles and nothing happens. I think sometimes you can get unexpected results, and like Allie was saying, that's if it goes sideways that way, sometimes you just have to let it run its course or try and mitigate the damage. Another thing that can happen, I think, is you step on the toes of a land spirit or a ghost or a deity or something like that, and it's offended at you. But there are ways that you can make reparations. You can do offerings, you can do rituals, you can do appeasements to try to set yourself right. Uncrossing or road opening work to undo those kind of conditions. But I think that especially when you're beginning, it's really hard to muster enough juice to set something in motion that's going to be really permanent and physically damaging. I think it takes a lot of practice to get to that point.
Yay, she remembered this time.
Yay. My suggestion would be that to remember that this is the real world. It's not Charmed. The big bad isn't going to jump out. There's not going to be a three-headed dog in your living room. You don't need to worry about horrific things. And I think worrying too much can get you out of that mind frame that you need to be in to be able to do something. So remember that nothing's going to jump out at you. There isn't going to be a demon that your sister falls in love with that you have to live with in your house, hopefully. And just remember to make your intentions known and take it one step at a time. Like David said, it's going to take years and years before you can, into your practice, before there's something that you would probably have to come talk to somebody like Solaris or David about to help fix. So just take a deep breath and trust yourself, trust your instincts.
Thank you.
That's really good.
Yeah. So the question again, one more time, is
what if I mess up?
What if I mess up? So I agree a lot with like what Joe and David were saying. I think that if you mess up, you're gonna be okay. There's no hole that's gonna open up in the earth to swallow you up. In my belief system, and my practice has, I feel like the outset for energy starts to be about 3 months. So about 3 months out, your energy has started to dissipate. And unless you renew a spell, which you certainly can, or you can keep one going in a jar, but you have to constantly feed it. So if you're not doing that, if it's just a one and done kind of spell or a ritual, then that energy just naturally just kind of goes away over time. And it's not a very long time. It's a few days to a few weeks to at most a few months, unless you continue to feed that or renew it. So even if the worst thing happened and you did something in the heat of anger that you wish that you regretted or that you want to take back, my recommendation is call that energy home, call it back to you, reclaim that power that you sent out, which you have the power to do. You're not completely powerless over the energy that you sent out. It was your energy. And so you can call it back home and you might not get it all back, but it's not going to do some kind of significant damage that you really think it's going to. And if something happens, like Allie was saying, me personally, I don't think that was you. I think whatever was going to happen was not the result of your spell. That's what was going to happen. And especially if you realize after the fact, I think that there just probably wasn't a whole lot that could have been done in that situation. So if you do something that you regret or that you want to take back, you can. And the worst thing that happens is you do nothing and the energy dissipates. I think that sometimes when we believe something bad is going to happen, then we make that happen, or we read into a situation those expectations. So if we do a spell for a friend that we think has backfired and then they have some kind of unfortunate experience, we will attach a meaning to that to connect it to the spell we did, when in fact it may not be related at all, but it kind of reinforces our idea that we made that happen. So for me personally, I don't believe that that's how magic works. I do think that we certainly can affect change, but when it comes to doing a spell for another person like that, we have to keep in mind that they have way more influence over their situation than we do using magic. And so the decisions that they make revolving around their personal situation influence the outcome of that far, far greater than any spell that we might have done for them. All our spell is doing for them is giving it a nudge in one direction or another, giving it an increase in the probability of the outcome that they wanted. That's it. We're not going to magically make it happen if it wasn't supposed to happen. So that's my opinion about that. I know a lot of people feel like that bad things happen when they do, spells that they did in anger. I think anger can be incredibly useful for spells. Anger is a powerful emotion. There is a ton of energy in anger and rage. And if you can harness that properly, you can fuel specific types of spells. So I say you don't have to turn away from your emotions when you're doing spells. Obviously, if I'm doing a healing spell, maybe I'm angry at my cancer, and I can use that emotion to eradicate that from my body. Or I can use love to do it. I have a choice. I don't think either is wrong. So you have to decide for yourself which emotion you want to work with, of course, but I don't rule out any of those emotions when you're working with spells.
Thank you. I guess that takes us into another one. How do I get my spells and rituals to work? And how would I know if they worked? Do you have a take on this, Allie?
How do you know if your spells worked? I would just keep watching for signs. Like, sometimes if you want to make sure the universe or the divine is actually listening, some people will ask for signs. So, like, specifically in a spell, if this is something you really want to know if it's actually working or if it's in the process, I would ask for a sign, like, can you show me this, or can you present a feather or something like that. I've been doing a little bit more research on that recently. Because some people, they take signs out of everything, just out of everything.
Right.
And I've been doing research that I like this makes sense to me, is that if it happens once, it's okay, that's a coincidence. Happens twice, okay, maybe something's going on. If it happens 3 times, okay, I'm listening now. So it's just, you just got to watch for, like, it's got to be a reoccurring thing, in my opinion, in order for it to be an actual sign. Like, I saw a bunny out here, I take that as a sign because you don't normally see bunnies in a rural area. But if it's out of the ordinary, I consider it. But if it's something not, then don't take it as magical. Just ask, and hopefully you'll get your answer.
Thank you.
Angie, what are your thoughts on how to get your spells and rituals to work, or how do you know that they've worked?
I also ask for signs. I'm very big with that. I also ask for signs. So that's how I know that mine have worked, because I ask for signs. And so if I don't get those signs, then obviously it wasn't meant to be.
Thank you. Ms. Cleo, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I actually, when I do things, I just do them and send them out there. And I feel like if something comes to pass that I recognize as being something that may have come from me, it makes me happy. But if it doesn't, I also feel like it may not have meant to be. I don't feel that all magic instantly just becomes magic. Sometimes things are not meant to be, and so they are not fulfilled. Other things are right on target.
Thank you. David?
How do I get my spells and rituals to work, and how do I know if they've worked? For me, rituals are a bit of a different beast, because a lot of those I have directed internally. And is this something where I'm trying to shift my consciousness? Is this something where I'm trying to open up possibilities, new ideas, or new pathways that maybe I didn't think of before? Is this trying to change the feelings that I have? And I try to keep a baseline, a measure of how much are those things happening. You know, how much is my consciousness shifted? How much is am I seeing new opportunities present themselves? When I'm working externally on the world around me, I usually, you know, you mentioned the time frame, that there's, I think if you keep practicing, you start to develop a sense for that time frame, or when the results are related to your working versus when they're a coincidence. And I don't think there's any good way. Obviously, with looking for signs is a great way to go forward, and looking for that confirmation. I think sometimes if you're just doing a quick, hey, I need that light to turn green, did it turn green or did it not turn green? That can be instant feedback on whether your spell worked or not. I did this spell to attract a new partner. Did someone interesting show up that met these criteria? And love magic works like crazy, but it's so strong and it's so effective, and it's like a hair trigger that you got to be really, really, like Ali said, really careful with with that. But I think developing a dialogue with the world around you and with your inner world is probably my most effective and best way of figuring out whether my stuff is working and how effective it is.
Thank you. Joe, what's your thoughts?
My tendency, I think, is more to Miss Cleo's. Once I put it out there, I kind of trust that what's been done has been done, and I don't need to keep checking on it, unless there's a few times where I've had immediate and complete smacks in the face that's not what was supposed to happen. You know, walking to your car and all of a sudden it hits you, and so that's when I figure that it probably didn't work and it wasn't supposed to work. But beyond that, if you trust yourself and again trust your instincts to put it out there, then you've put it out there and let it happen. And as long as you don't get that immediate smack in the face that that's not supposed to happen, then just trust that it did.
What was the question? One more time.
The question was, how do I get my spells and rituals to work, and how do I know if they did?
Okay, so I tend to be a timeline person, because for me that feels like it feels empowering to have some control over that, rather than leaving it up to the universe to decide if I get what I want or not. So for me, I like the timeline of spells tend to work, you know, I think within 3 months, and that's kind of my general rule. If it has not come to pass within that 3-month mark, then I take that to mean the spell has not worked, But some spells will work sooner than others, and it just depends on what kind of spell you're talking about and how realistic you are with that expectation. So a spell that is going to bring you your one true love kind of thing, which by the way is not a realistic spell, but let's say you did that, you probably want to give it that full 3 months, because if you met your one true love in 3 days, you probably should question that. So other things might happen sooner. So you might, if you've put out your resumes and you're looking to get an answer from an employer that you've already interviewed with, that might be 3 days rather than 3 months. And so I think those are the kind of things that I look at, is how long is it realistic for the spell to kind of have a chance to manifest. And I think 3 months for me is about the outset that I'm willing to give it. And if it hasn't happened by then, I look at reasons maybe why it didn't. And that could be perhaps I was, spelling for something that wasn't really in my best interest, or that I didn't really want, or I worded it in a way that undermined other goals or values that I had. So a little bit of going back to the drawing board and just kind of assessing what I might have done wrong in the spell itself. And for me, generally, I don't do a spell twice. I will either change the entire spell or scrap it. And I feel like you have to go into your spells knowing it's going to work for you. You have to have complete confidence. It can't be a wish. It can't be a hope. It has to be a knowing. And if you don't have that knowing, then that reduces the probability of your spell manifesting in the way that you want it to. So for me, from the outset, from the very beginning, it has to be, I'm all in. This is exactly, so I think what Angie was saying earlier, you got to do the work that comes before that. You've got to make sure that you're carefully thinking through your spell or your work to make sure that you're actually doing something that is fulfilling a goal that you really want, not just what you think you want. So that involves some shadow work. That involves some time spent with yourself to get really real with yourself and making sure that you're being truthful about what you really desire versus what you think you do. The other part of that is to make sure that you have, already laid out all the groundwork to be in alignment with your words. You've got your actions and your words in alignment. So if you're asking for something or you are spelling for something and you haven't done all the foundational work to go along with it, then for lack of a better word, the universe is looking at you and saying, I don't believe you. You don't really want this because you haven't done the work yet. That means, if you're asking for, abundance in your life, if you're asking for money to come into your life, but you are frivolously spending the money you have, or you're not saving it in a responsible way or spending it responsibly, the universe is going to say, I don't believe you. I don't think you want more money. You have plenty of money because you're spending it frivolously. And only somebody who has plenty of money and spends it frivolously, would spend it frivolously. So you clearly don't need any more. Someone who is not expressing gratitude on a regular basis in their life probably would not see an abundance spell work very well for them. Someone who has some personal work to do on themselves will probably not see a successful relationship manifest until they have worked out their own kind of issues, so they're not bringing those issues into the new relationship. Those are the kinds of, that's the kind of work that when we talk about do the fucking work, that's the kind of work that we're talking about. So make sure you're cohesive with what you're saying you want and your actions and all of that. And then the timeline, just be realistic about how long, tomorrow is probably not for a lot of spells, a realistic timeline to give yourself for something to manifest. So be realistic with how long things really take.
Thank you. That was lovely. The next one, I have a problem with someone who practices witchcraft and they drew some symbols on my doorstep or my porch in front of my house in chalk or charcoal or dirt. I'm very afraid, what do I do? This is also a variant of I've been cursed, help me, what do I do? Allie, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on the whole cursing, it all depends on the kind of person you are. Like, honestly, if I don't know, just for example, if a Christian came up to me and told me that they were worried about that, or if they were stressed about something like that, I would probably tell them just to erase it or something. I wouldn't tell them, oh, go do this ritual, go do this, because it's something that I believe would work on it. From what I've noticed on most things, you put energy into it, then it's more than likely going to happen. So if you stress about something, if you think you're cursed or something, depending on if anything happens, just don't put any energy into it and you should be fine. I personally haven't experienced curses yet. I haven't had to deal with it or anything yet. I hope I don't. But that's just kind of my brief thoughts on it.
Thank you. Angie?
I would say that I honestly, yeah, that I wouldn't worry about it. That's a lot of fear. People have so much fear, and they want you to be scared, and there's nothing to be scared of. And I just, yeah, I wouldn't be afraid. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't be afraid.
Thank you.
That's how I look at it.
Miss Cleo?
Gosh, I haven't really experienced it either, but I think the first thing I would probably do if I thought it was a legitimate curse that someone was putting on me, since I do believe things like that can happen, is I think first conjure some sort of protection for my household and myself, and then perhaps do salt in the doorway. I don't know what I would use, maybe salt water to wash the symbol off. I would have to probably research to see what is a good thing that you could use for something, but I would take the visible sign away, which would probably give it less power. And like the other girls were saying, once I had done some protection so that I felt comfortable that I was protecting my home, then I would just forget about it.
Thank you. That's a really good answer. Oh, my turn?
Yeah, I think it's yours.
Okay. I think that actual curses are vanishingly rare. It's an actual curse that actually has weight behind it just doesn't happen that often. And a lot of times the kind of people who fling curses around quite frequently either they're unstable or they just don't have a lot of the juice to make those things happen. With that said, though, I think that you can run afoul of a lot of different things. You could have there's the Malocchio, the evil eye that you're under, or you can be under cross conditions, or you can suffer a string of bad luck that you interpret as a curse. I think that if you're cultivating a good relationship with all your ancestors and the spirits and deities that you work with, that'll do a lot to help shield you from most of the stuff that might be coming in. If you do regular purification work and blessing work, and the salt water is another good one, uncrossing work, that'll take care of pretty much everything. And if something gets past that, I would be really surprised.
To me, something like that is it has power if you give it power. If you believe in it and you believe you're cursed, then you're going to start seeing the things around you as curses instead of just life. If you leave it up and you fret about it and you take a picture of it and it's always on your mind, they've won, because now they have that space in your brain and you're giving it power. If you don't like it, I like the idea of using salt water, Miss Cleo said, to wash it away. Have your kind of mini little ceremony of washing it away. It's not going to affect you. You're not going to give it the power to impact your life, and so it won't. And I agree with David that the instances of a real issue that you need to either get help with or do something larger than just tell yourself that it's okay to let that go and not let them have the power over you is extremely rare. And the best thing you can do is take back your mind space and your time and your life and let it go, and don't let them win.
Thank you.
Well said.
If you feel like you've been cursed, if somebody's leaving symbols on your front door, I think this particular question was from someone who said that they had encountered someone who practices witchcraft who was targeting them and had left some symbols on their front step, and they were actually trying to figure out what the symbols meant. I think anytime someone who is not your friend leaves symbols on your front door, you can just assume that it's bad, or there's not good intent for it, no matter if you know what it means or not. I agree with everyone's assessment here. Like, sweep it away, throw some hot water over it with some salt and some, vinegar, or, any kind of protective herbs. You can make a floor wash if you want to, with some protective herbs. It could be something you have in your cabinet, like some basil or some rosemary, and, just make like a strong mop water. You could put some oils in there if you want to, or you can put some brick dust or some black salt. All of those things work really well for banishing and for warding off, things like evil, but also just bad intentions and negativity and things like that. And just wash your steps off. That's what I would do. I wouldn't just sweep it off, but I'd want to use water personally just to feel like it was all gone. And then I would, cleanse that whole space. Obviously, they got as far as your front steps, and so I would cleanse that part of my property where they physically had come onto it, just to kind of make sure that there was no memory on my land of that person. And I would talk to my land spirits and be like, you need to fuck this bitch up next time she comes around my house. And then I think if you just in general feel like you've been cursed, I feel like, Joe had a really good point, don't give it power. The more power you give it, which involves your time and thinking about it, that every moment that you think about it, every moment that you fear it, every moment that you worry, that's giving it power. And so the more power you give it, the stronger that person's spell is going to work, unfortunately. And that's what they want you to do. Putting a symbol on your front steps, that's all about making you afraid of it and making you give it power. So you're actually powering their spell for them. So don't do that. On top of that, what David said is so correct. Very few people have the kind of experience and the kind of power to actually hex someone with any real juice, with any kind of real consequences for that person. And so if you have received some kind of clear notification that you've been cursed, then definitely give it no consideration, because that means that person has no idea what the fuck they're doing. A real hex is going to come at you without you knowing about it. They're not going to advertise it on your front door. They're going to do it in a way that you are not aware of it, so that they can continue to feed that spell and to power it for as long as they see fit without your understanding, until you've already started to experience some of those consequences. And so that they can stand back and watch you writhe in discomfort. And so if you have someone telling you they've hexed you, or if you've got someone who is putting symbols on your front door, they don't know what they're doing. No matter what they say, they don't know what they're doing, because you just don't tell someone you're going to hex them. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight into it personally if that has happened. I would get rid of the actual, stuff that they left, and then not think about it anymore.
Well said. I agree. The next one, I love the idea of witchcraft, but I don't believe in deities and I don't believe in magic. Can I still be a witch? This is also another one that's kind of related. Is can I be a Christian and a witch? This kind of cuts to, what are the qualifications to be able to call yourself a witch? I don't know. I think that's kind of where it's going. You want to start us off, Allie?
My opinion on it is, if you believe in energy, the collective energy, if you believe in a deity or a divine being, in my personal opinion, you're a witch. Honestly, some days, like, I have a conversation with my mother-in-law, she's Mormon, and she believes in energy. So she could be kind of considered a witch too, because she works with energy. Some people don't like that term just because they think it's negative because of the media and everything, but my personal opinion, if you work with the energies, you work with earth, you work with stuff, I think that you could be considered a witch. Like in that paganism book that Jolene suggested, I actually recently bought it, and it mentions in there about Christian witches. I actually knew a Buddhist witch. I dated a Buddhist witch, actually. It was interesting. It was very interesting. But if you want to be a witch, be a witch. Just as I think the main thing is you take responsibility for your energy and you believe that there is energy out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Angie?
Yeah, I agree with that. If you want to be a witch, then be a witch. But so I came from a very strict Catholic family, and if you look at the Bible, and if they are very strict with, they're very, according to the Bible, paganism isn't okay and stuff like that. So when people ask, can you still be a witch and be Christian, to me, I'm like, yeah, why not? But that has to be up to the person. I don't think anyone has any right to judge. So if you are okay with it with yourself, then why not? If that's what you want to be, then why not? If that is your calling, then call yourself a witch. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cleo?
I think that actually your intentions and the energy that you put out into the world is what I think has a lot to do with being a witch. I also feel that it has a lot to do with how you feel about the earth and what's going on with it. I think that our job as witches is to try and not do harmful things to the environment, and we see way too much of that happening. So I think it's not so much religion that makes a difference as much as it is your intentions as far as being a person who's forthright, has good intentions who wants to generate their energy into something that you hope you can make a difference out of yourself by your spell or whatever you put out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wiggle my nose.
So I think that if you don't believe in magic and you don't believe in the spirits and that kind of thing, can I still be a witch? I think a lot of people get hung up on their identity like it's a suit of clothes that they're wearing. You know, can I still be a witch if I'm not doing the things? And the thing about being a witch is that witchcraft is what you do. It's not what you are. And a better way to think of it is, you know, if you don't want to do the spells and you don't want to practice the spirituality, why do you want to be a witch? I mean, what even are you after this for? On the other part, can you be a Christian and a witch? I don't think that's possible. I think that those are antithetical. I don't think that those two things work together. And I think that there's well, I know that Solaris had some things to say about that, and so I'll leave some of those thoughts to her. But there are a lot of people who will try to justify and go through some mental gymnastics to say, well, I can be this and also be a witch. But I think that if you look at history, you know, look at what does the term witch mean, and what does it mean in different languages, and what are the people who are doing witchcraft, what are they doing? You start to get a sense for this. These are people who use non-physical or spiritual things to affect change, and sometimes that's bad change, and sometimes that's good change. But it's people who have agency on a spiritual level, and it's all rooted in that. What is it that you do? It's not what are you, it's what are you doing. So I think that my answer would be, you know, the which is better used as a verb, like are you witching, you know, then you're a witch.
Thank you. Miss Jolene?
My view on it is, I don't think you need to believe in specific deities. There's a lot of them to choose from if you choose to. My connection is usually more through my ancestors and what they believed, but I think you need to believe in some sort of connection or energy, or otherwise, what are you doing? Like David said, why are you here? If you don't think that there's some sort of connection or energy with other people in the world that can be influenced by what you're doing, then are you in it for the cool hat and to scare your parents because you're rebelling against what you grew up in? So I think deity, some sort of energy, and whichever way you look at it is up to you, but there needs to be something there that you can influence, or you're just trying to scare grandma. I will leave the opinions of whether you can be a witch and a Christian to the others, because I don't think I'm a good candidate for that just because of my past and my history. I think it's too connected. But you got to have something to work with, or why you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a few parts to this question. I agree with Joe completely. I don't think we all address this very clearly. The first part of, I think, David's question was, if you don't believe in deities, can you still be a witch? I personally say absolutely yes. I'm a secular witch. I don't work with deities. I think that paganism is more of the religion. Witchcraft is a practice. It is not a religion. So you absolutely do not need to incorporate deities into your practice whatsoever in order to authentically practice witchcraft. The second part of that is, if you don't believe in magic, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? You know, it doesn't mean that you have to do spells or that you have to make your witchcraft look like anybody else's. It just means, you know, exactly what Joe and some of the others said, you know, a belief in some type of spirituality or in some type of something else besides, you know, if you're not maybe sure what you believe, but you believe in something. I mean, that's probably enough. You believe that some kind of energy exists, or You can even be an atheist witch. You don't even have to believe in life after this or reincarnation. Those are also on the table for things you don't necessarily have to pick up. But, if you just are attracted to witchcraft because you like that you perceive it as being like very female empowered, or very empowering kind of path, you can claim those things for yourself without the label of witch. Those are available to you all the time. You can be kind and empowered and a badass female or male, and you don't have to join the ranks of witches in order to practice those things. So if you're drawn to that, that's great. Find some witch friends so you can have that kind of vibe around you, but you yourself don't have to join that in order to practice it. The question about Christian witches, I have a few points I want to make about that one. The first is, you don't need permission or approval from anybody to call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. So if you want to call yourself a Christian witch, then you don't need any of our or anybody else's permission or approval to do that. You're empowered to label yourself however you want to label yourself. The second thing is really just, how you identify in no way affects how I practice my path. And so even if I don't agree with what you do or like what you do or believe in what you do, it has no bearing on my own practice. So it doesn't hurt me for you to believe or practice the way you do unless it infringes on my rights in some way. So the third part is, can you be a Christian and a witch? This is purely my opinion. And then remembering that you don't need my approval or permission to call yourself what you want to call yourself. I agree with David. I think Christianity and witchcraft are antithetical to one another. I grew up in the church, not the Mormon church, but in the Southern evangelical church. And so I have some pretty strong, this is a very biased answer, by the way. I have very strong, ugly opinions about Christianity in general. And so that influences my opinion about anything that has the word Christian attached to it. I think that if you take the two apart, witchcraft is very much about empowerment. It's very much about taking the forces of nature and partnering with the forces of nature and the universe, and wielding those things to achieve your goals. And Christianity, on the other hand, I feel works to strip you of that power at every turn. And so I can't for myself fathom why someone who is drawn to that empowerment of witchcraft feel drawn to a place where that power is trying to be taken away from you, and where it is actively, taken away from people all over the world, from women, from people of color, from the LGBTQ community. These are people who are targeted by the Christian faith and system. And I view it as a very abusive system. So I can't see how those two things can work together without canceling each other out in some way. With that said, I think Christian witches, their belief system is really based on Jesus was a sorcerer, and the Bible is really just a magical spell book. And I think that there are some traditions that do look at the Bible as a resource for spells, specifically like Psalms. But they're not Christian witches. They're witches that are utilizing the resources of the Bible in order to practice witchcraft. So there's a little bit of difference there. I don't take a whole lot of exception to calling Jesus a sorcerer. He certainly did some magical shit in the Bible. The Christians call it miracles. We call it magic, So I don't, I can definitely understand kind of where they're coming from. But I think you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to cherry pick those parts of the Bible that can, confirm for you that you can be a Christian witch, while ignoring all the other parts of the Bible that seek to control you as a woman, as a person, and that, just has completely conflicting and contradictory information. So I don't see that as a whole lot different from Christians that cherry pick the parts of the Bible they choose to adhere to versus the other parts that tell them to go fuck themselves. And somehow they sleep at night. So, again, this is my very biased opinion about these two things. I think if you are drawn to that path of Christian witchery, take time to learn about it, and if it's the right fit for you, don't let any of us certainly tell you otherwise. No, there's no witch police, there's no label police, nobody's going to come and take your witch card away from you. You might have some heated discussions on the internet with people who will tell you otherwise, but you can't, you just can't let other people tell you who to be. So whatever our opinions are, I'm certainly not going to try to stop you from claiming that title for yourself or from practicing the way that is right for you.
Thank you. That was really well said. Next, let's talk about how do we know and tell the difference between what's a good coven and what's a bad coven. Allie, do you want to get us started?
I haven't had much experience with covens. I've only had communication with 2 of them, but the one of them I did have communication with. They said that part of initiation is you get whipped, and I'm like, nope, no, I'm good. So I would say there was pretty much them saying, if you leave this coven, this will happen to you, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'd rather not be whipped, thank you. From what I've understood, a lot of people tell me that it's best to work solitary because you never know what people's intentions are. But stuff like that, yeah, I would say that would be very, very fishy. Eventually I'd like to try and put in my application at the Gem State Black Hat Society. That's one reason why I bought the paganism book. I've got 2 years to study, so I'm trying. But that's the sign of a good coven is your research, what you're getting into. They lay it straight out forward for you. But if there is stuff they ask you to do, like one thing I learned from one of my friends is if there is a main person in the coven that says you have to do the spells I do, you have to do this, you have to do that, that is not a coven that you want to join because you're doing what the main person wants. You're not doing what's good for the collective. So that's my opinion on it.
Thank you.
That's good. It's well said. Angie, what do you think?
Trying to keep a straight face. Well, definitely run if they want to whip you. I'm just saying. Definitely run. Yeah, that's a huge sign. Another one is don't drink Jesus juice. I'm sorry. Okay, that was bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, don't, don't, if they want to have, unprotected sex, drugs, throw that in, and you're unsure about it, I would definitely not agree. I mean, if you're okay with the whole sex thing, then, that's your business. But if you're unsure about it, then hey, that definitely shouldn't be in with the whole coven rules. But, a coven is all about a sister and brotherhood and coming together and practicing doing spells and learning as a group, and being there for each other and having discussions and, having a safe place, and not doing weird things. Well, doing weird things, but not doing weird things. I hope that made sense.
Yes.
Doing safe, weird things. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Consensual weird things.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you, Angie.
Yep.
Miss Cleo? There we go.
I think that I've never had an experience with the coven, but because it's such a small group of people, it can be a very good thing because you get close and do some important things together, or I think it can become cliquey to where people in the groups kind of split off, and then I think it can sort of be a bad thing. I don't personally think I'd want to be in. I like our big Magic Valley group. I think it's wonderful because there's so many people and so many diverse opinions about things, and the individuality is what it's about. That's what draws me to it, is that everybody is following their own path. And in a coven, most generally, they're more or less doing a specific thing that the whole group has decided on, and that kind of contradicts what I look for in paganism.
Thank you. Good answer. How about you, Joe? No, I think it's David's turn.
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Kind of. So for a magical group or a coven, I would say that my guiding principle is informed, enthusiastic consent. You should know what you're getting into before you're getting into it, and you should be enthusiastic about it. And that doesn't mean that you're not necessarily sometimes challenged, but you should have an idea. Like if you're being asked to drink Kool-Aid, you should know what's in the Kool-Aid. If you're being asked to participate in group sex, you should know ahead of time so that you can decide for sure whether that's something that you want to be into. I don't have any judgment about groups that want to include those kind of things. The problem is when someone says, we're going to have a group that gets together to do magic, and then suddenly, oh, by the way, you have to take your clothes off as part of this thing. That's a surprise. And suddenly people are like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I signed up for this. There are a couple of other pieces too. Leadership in the group, how much of this is a cult of personality and people just clustered around someone who's really charismatic versus how much is it a group who's working together for the same goal? How much do the people in it behave honestly and do what they say they're going to do versus do they say one thing to your face and do something different behind your back? I don't think I need to really articulate which is healthy and which is not, but these are the kind of guideposts that I use for evaluating a group and how healthy it is and whether it's worth participating in.
Thank you.
I think I keep going back to trusting yourself and trusting your instincts, and I think that's a huge part of it. If you feel uncomfortable, don't do it. If you don't feel 100% comfortable, don't do it. I would also suggest even more research, but research the people. Look them up on Facebook. If your state has an open registry for court records, a lot of states you can see what they were charged with. You can't see everything else, but you can see if they've been charged with some sort of fraud, or if they're on the offender registry. To do this kind of work and get close with people, you're gonna have to open yourself up to be a little vulnerable sometimes, and you need to know the people that you're going to be doing that with. And I look at it like I would, if my daughter or my little sister or anybody else was going to be hanging out with people, how would I investigate them? And you'll find out a lot just by going on social media, and you'll find out a lot just by a Google search, Google their name. And then if they don't allow you to come and learn with them and be part of it before you make a huge commitment, I think that's another big red flag. And like David said, informed, enthusiastic consent. If they're hiding things from you, that should be your biggest flag, and you should just turn around and walk away. It's so much better to do things and be solitary and trust in yourself than get caught up with people who are trying to either abuse or take advantage of you. And if a coven is what you want, then wait for the right one. It's like waiting for your right person. You're not just going to marry the first person, excuse me, you see. You're going to wait for the right one, and you need to trust yourself, but be super cautious and make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into.
Good answer. Thank you.
That's well said.
So how to recognize, I know David qualified it with coven, but I think across the board, I think a lot of times people join groups instead of covens, thinking that they're safer or that they'll have a more positive experience or something like that. And I will say a lot of times groups can often operate just like a coven, and they can be just as toxic as a coven can be. I think that I'm not Wiccan, and so I think that there is a time and place for an initiation or initiatory model of a coven where you have to go through certain types of degrees and be initiated into the coven and things like that. There are some Wiccan traditions like Gardnerian and maybe Alexandrian that do use, things like the scourge and maybe whips. And those are things that may not be revealed to you in the beginning. So obviously, if you're going to be joining a specific type of tradition or path, a coven that practices that, do your homework. You should know what that is going to entail to some degree. Don't be afraid to ask questions. In those types of traditions, they're heavily predicated on a lot of secrecy, and they may not be forthcoming, and that doesn't necessarily mean you should disqualify them if that is the path that you're on and that you want to practice. It's important, like everybody else has said, enthusiastic consent the whole entire way. And like Allie said, good job you, because, if you leave the coven, there's a consequence. Fuck that. Don't do that. Like, please don't do that. Don't hand over power to somebody else like that, over your body and autonomy like that. Because then when it comes down to it, are you going to be afraid to leave because there's going to be some kind of, retribution or consequence? And whatever the reasoning that they come up with, just don't drink that Kool-Aid. It however they make it sound, it can't be worth it to give up your, your dignity. So please don't do that. Personally, I feel like a lot of those coven models are a little bit antiquated, and they're kind of outdated at this point. We have the internet now, and we don't need coven models to teach us a lot of the things that we used to need coven models for. The information that was kept so heavily guarded, and secret for so many decades is now freely available on the internet and in books. And so we really are looking to covens a lot of times nowadays more for community and for safety, to be able to practice openly with a group of people that we trust. And, sure, some covens are going to have some different mission goals or some different, purposes to them. Again, if your coven is about, or your group is about having group sex and you're okay with that, I would just say, if that becomes like the only thing you do when you show up to coven meetings, you're not in a coven, you're in a sex cult. So at least be honest with yourself about what you're doing. And, you know, and that's okay. No judgment. Go be in a sex cult if you want to. Just don't call it witchcraft. That's not what you're doing there. You know, if one of the warning signs I would look for is, you know, if you show up on day one and they want to initiate you before you've had a chance to meet everybody or ask questions or get to know what they're about, what, you know, what do they believe in, you know, how do they handle conflict, what do they do if there's a disagreement between members over, you know, the structure, or do they have those things figured out? Do they have a protocols or policies, things like that? You know, if they want to initiate you on the first day that they met you, that's a huge red flag. Run the other way. They don't have their shit together. They want you to agree to something that, you know, they want you to give uninformed consent, essentially. So I think that warning signs of a toxic group would look like if you see problems brewing in a group between members and the leaders of the group are not quashing it immediately, and they're not quashing it in a way that is healthy. You know, if they're stirring the pot, for example, if they are ignoring the problem, if they are treating it like a parent and a child relationship, those are all red flags. You want to, you know, look for covens who encourage you to act like an adult first and foremost, and not treat you like a child, meaning that they're not solving the problems for you. And that means they're going to encourage you to talk out your issues with another coven mate rather than them be a mediator for all of your issues. They're going to acknowledge and be transparent about problems in the group. They're going to deal with things quickly. If you're looking at a group or a coven where they just kind of sweep everything under the rug and hope it goes away, or they ignore problems until they become so big that that makes the whole group just unhappy to be there, those are problems in the leadership of the group or in the group members. You know, we have learned through talking with a lot of other leaders of groups that it just takes one bad apple in the group. That's all it takes. One toxic person, one person who has poor problem-solving skills to ruin the whole group. They will not be influenced by the good stuff. They'll infect all the good stuff and turn it bad. And pretty soon you have infighting and you have those kind of things. So if you walk into a group and there's a lot of, you know, backbiting, there's a lot of gossiping, there's a lot of talking about each other when the other person's not there, that kind of stuff, those are red flags that it's not a very good culture that you're walking into, and you might want to think about not joining that group. These are questions that you can ask when you're in an interview process for joining a coven or a group. You can say, how do you handle these things? What do you do if? And just pose those scenarios. If they get defensive about that, if you're not allowed to question the leader, for example, those are red flags. You know, I would highly encourage you to read about and educate yourself about what are the warning signs of a cult. Sometimes pagan groups turn culty, and they expect you just to follow their orders and do what they tell you to do. And, you know, it's very difficult, because if you join the group, they might not have treated you that way in the beginning. And it's little things that start to add up. And before you know it, you formed relationships with these people. And then you start to wonder if you're just making it up in your head. And then at some point you have isolated yourself away from family and friends, and you don't have anybody else to turn to. Those are typical culty things. And then you don't have a real solid way out, because you feel like you're gonna, you know, you don't have a support system. You've left it all behind. But you know, educate yourself on cults and look at what the warning signs of those would be, and look at what toxic behaviors look like. Educate yourself on those things so that you can recognize it. If you've got a group that's full of whiny victim, you know, mentality kind of people, I would suggest looking at another group, because it'll just be very difficult to try to influence anything in any other direction at that point. So those would be my warning signs to look for. And if you find yourself in the middle of a group like that, and you didn't realize it until you were, knee deep in it, leave. You don't have to come up with an excuse or reason. You don't have to, try to change the group. You can just say, I don't want to be, in this group anymore, and just leave. It's not always easy, because sometimes those people are your friends, but you have to decide for yourself what you're willing to put up with. And as long as you're a member of a group like that, you're telling them that you're willing to tolerate it. So never put up with abuse, never put up with someone taking control over your choices for you. You should never give up your choices, never give up your autonomy, never give up your freedom or your dignity. And if a group or a coven ever asks that of you, that's a huge red flag that you should say no to.
I want to add one thing that I thought of while you were talking, and those are all excellent points. There are some, especially magical groups, that will ask you to take an oath or threaten to retaliate with magic against you and use this unseen force as a way to coerce you into staying into the group. You don't need to worry about that. That's an oath you can break, and you won't suffer any kind of magical retaliation. Or, the people in the group might be pissed off at you, but you're not going to piss off the gods for breaking your oath if you're being held to account in a group that's toxic. And a lot of those magical oaths that you take, if it's not an informed and enthusiastically consenting oath, then and you made an oath, but the other side they tricked you, then you're not. I don't see how you can consider yourself held to that oath. So those are totally okay to break.
And one more thing to add to that: if you're watching this and you live in the Magic Valley area, excuse me, then feel free to contact one of us, or you can join the Magic Valley Pagans and Witches group to share your concerns and get feedback. If you feel like you're not sure about what to do, you can reach out for help. You can ask for help. You can ask us for help. You can contact us through our pages or through the group. You don't feel like you have to be completely alone. If you're being threatened or bullied or any of those things, or coerced, whether it's for sex or whether it's just to stay in a group, we want you to know that you don't have to do that by yourself. You can ask for help. We will help you. We'll help you contact the police if that's what you want to do. We'll help you find resources or ways to remove yourself from that group. So please don't feel like you have to suffer in silence. We're here to help if we can. We can't solve the problem all the way for you. You've got to take those steps for yourself. But if you're in an unsafe situation, we will help you get help. Okay, next question. I think, Joe, you had a list of some things. You want to get started? Did we already cover them?
I think most of them. The only things that, the only other one I think we haven't covered is what do you need to start? And that's as individual as each person's practice. I think really the only thing you need to start is yourself and the nature around you. I guess I'm coming off as kind of like the gloom and doom person, but there's going to be a lot of people that try to tell you have to have this crystal with this herb, with this kind of water, with this wand, or it's not going to work. And if they're trying to sell you something, that's why. So be cautious of pages or groups or just people like on Instagram. It's really big. I see it. Here's your starter kit. If you don't buy my starter kit, you're not a witch and everything you do will fail. I think the more you get into it and the more you do your research and the more you read, you'll figure out what things you're drawn to. Maybe you're a green witch and your garden is your safe place and your magical place, and that's what you're drawn to. Maybe you're one of the people that loves all the crystals and you get on Etsy and buy all the crystals. But I think that comes to you as the more you practice and the more you learn, you'll figure out what you're drawn to, and you don't need anything specific to start except for the desire to do it. And I guess a basic belief in something that you can influence by doing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Allie, do you have thoughts on that, on what you need to get started?
Like Jolene says, you don't necessarily need anything to start, but if you're like some of the baby witches that I know and you want to go and do some shopping, you could always go with just like the basics that I know is white candles. If you don't know what specifically you want to do, you could get some olive oil to anoint your candles, rosemary, lavender. We can't have lavender in my house, unfortunately. Clear quartz, just basic, like I carry a lithium quartz with me all the time. So, but you really don't need anything, like even, like you could have stuff gifted to you, like say, hey, I want to start, if anybody wants to gift me anything, you could do that. But like Jillian says, you don't really need anything, but I like to go shopping sometimes, so.
There's one thing I forgot. I've never heard it, but there's a persistent kind of idea that goes out that you can't start reading tarot or you can't do any of these things unless you're gifted with either the deck or the crystal or whatever. And I don't think that's true. I think it will work perfectly well with your energy if you bought it or if somebody gifted it to you. So if you're drawn to it, don't wait for somebody to buy it or somebody to give it to you. Go see Solaris and she'll help you figure out what's best for you.
Oh, I love that. When Solaris posted that on Magic Valley Pagans, I'm like, yes, finally somebody said it.
I love it. Thank you, guys. How about you, Angie? Any advice for what you need when you first start?
You know, when I first started, I thought you needed everything. And I was told, oh, you have to buy this, you have to buy that. And then I learned that you didn't. You don't need anything. When you first start, you don't have to buy anything. Just sit down, meditate with yourself. Learn, you know what you need is learn to love yourself. That's what you need. You need to learn how to love yourself. Get to know yourself. That's the first thing that you need to do, is learn to love yourself. Get to know yourself. I would say that's the very first lesson that you need to do, is get to know yourself. And then once you get to know yourself, then get into your magic. Get to know your magic and don't be afraid of it, you know, and then get a white candle, light that white candle. But I would say meditate, and don't be afraid. But I would say first lesson is to love yourself, and don't be afraid to get to know yourself, you know, and don't fall for those things of, oh, you have to buy this. Oh, you have to buy that. Oh, I have to do this spell for you because I know how to do this spell. Don't fall for those things, because you're going to have those people on Instagram that's going to be like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. No, you don't. No. But I would say very first thing is to love yourself and get to know yourself, because that is going to be the number one thing that's going to be best for you, is to love yourself. And once you got that down, you're good.
Good advice.
Really good advice.
What about you?
I'm of two minds about this. The first part of me, half of me says, honestly, you really don't need anything. You don't need any physical tools. All you need is kind of what you want, your desire, and a plan to make it happen. What are you going to do what actions are you going to take? But the other side of me says that, it can be tough to get there. So sometimes having the physical things is helpful to get you there. So if you want to have a robe because it makes you feel like you're more in the mindset to cast a spell, get a robe, wear a robe. If you need a candle and some herbs and some water and a full ritual to get you there, to sort of pull you into that mindset and what you're doing, by all means, pull those things in. Salt is a really handy, if you're using materials, if you're using things, salt is a really good stand-in for a lot of things, because salt and the spirit of salt is really responsive to what you want it to do. So you can ask it to cleanse, you can ask it to purify, you can ask it to banish, you can ask it to, there's a lot of different things, you can ask it to help manifest and crystallize things into your life. And so when you're looking at these, I would say, as you're beginning, it might be helpful to look at the spell you're going to do, look at the ritual you're going to do, what's the bare minimum that you can get away with doing it with, and then do it a few times. And then if you have to substitute later, then you start to think, oh, okay, I can substitute earth instead of salt in this, or I can substitute whatever. But if you don't have anything, if you don't have anything, any tools or any ability or any money to buy those things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just imagining and visualizing that thing there. I visualize salt in a pile in front of me, and I'm asking the spirit of salt to do this thing. I'm visualizing that I have an athame in my hand as a knife to do this action of cutting that I need to cut. And so there's I know that's why I can't really fully commit to saying you don't need anything, because I think some people need that, or it's helpful to have those physical things. And sometimes you want to work with the spirit of salt, or you want to work with the spirit of rosemary, or you want to work with the spirit of quartz to help you do this thing. But on the other hand, do you need all these things for every single spell? I think it's easy to get trapped in that idea that you need all the things, or that it's fun to have all the toys. And then you've got an altar, a shelf full of crap that just collects dust.
Yeah. I would say for sure, like everybody here, I think you all said like what I would say too. I think when you're first starting out, most of us, I think when we are introduced into paganism or witchcraft, a lot of the books focus on tools. And so at the same time, they're saying, oh no, you don't really need anything. And then they spend like 5 chapters on what tools you need. And so it's really, it's not our fault that we believe we need all these things. We're constantly being told that. And then of course, witches today, you can't go on the internet without seeing these beautiful magazine covers on Instagram of people's altars and all their haul that they have of their witchy items. You're like, well, I must need those things too. And so obviously those things are beautiful, but sometimes I question, do those things get used? Do they actually? And I'm sure those altars don't look like that all the time. Whose could? Like how are you really using the altar if it looks that beautiful? Because I would be afraid to touch it for fear of not making it beautiful anymore. So I think ultimately, even though we all kind of start off really thinking we need all the things, and you might go get all the things, but you learn just over time with your practice what you really do use and what you really need and what you like. And the rest just kind of collects dust. And for a lot of us, we have to learn this lesson the hard way. We have to spend the dollars and get the shiny things and feel good that we are matching this Instagram, idealistic model of what witchcraft is supposed to look like. And then until we really actually practice witchcraft, and then we realize, oh, it looks like this. It's messy and there's ash everywhere and there's candle wax on my floor, and I can't take a picture of this shit, but it is what I do. And that's what that's what it is. So, and you learn which tools feel good to you. And it's not all, and a lot of times it's usually not the ones that are the prettiest. And so that just takes doing the work and figuring it out. And if you're just starting off, everybody had good suggestions. White candles you can't go wrong with. If you're burning candles, if you're doing those kind of work, white candles can substitute for anything. So, and you can get those anywhere. You can even get them from the thrift store. You can get, like, a lot of weddings, they give away their leftover candles to the thrift stores. So a lot of times you can find good hauls of used candles that haven't even been lit yet.
And they're low key, they don't attract a lot of attention,
right.
And they're also handy in a power outage.
Yes, they are. We recently had a power outage, and we were like, we have been preparing for this day our whole lives. Like, no witch is unprepared for a power outage. I would say yes, definitely to the white candles. I would say, I'm personally a proponent of use what you have on hand before you buy something new. Use what's in your spice cabinet, use what's growing in your yard, or what you can collect on your hiking trips or walks, things like that. Go walk along the river or somewhere, collect some nice rocks or some sticks, and start crafting. I mean, it's witchcraft, so start crafting and putting your heart and your love and your spirit into those things. Challenge yourself to make as much as you can with your own items, with items that you can repurpose or items that you find before you choose something new. Because you might find, for me, I bought this beautiful fancy athame when I was a baby pagan witch, right? And I don't know how much I paid for it. I don't think very much, but it's very fancy. I don't use it. And I learned, and I've got, I don't know how many wands. I don't use wands. I don't like wands, I learned, but I have them. And so if I had known what I knew, if I knew then what I know now, there we go. I wouldn't have probably half the stuff I've accumulated. And so when you meet an older witch, of course they're going to have accumulated all kinds of things. And you don't start off with that stuff. Those things arrived at different times of their life. A lot of times the items find you and at the exact right time that you need it. And so, don't believe everything you read. Don't believe all the Instagram posts. Start with what you actually are going to use. Okay, today my spell requires a candle and rosemary. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need altar cloths. You don't need anything else. So just start with what you need, and then you build it from there based on your actual practice. And I think that I would have liked to have told myself, if I could go back in time and tell myself that would save me a lot of money and grief, honestly. One of the questions that we got was, I love tarot cards and pendulums. They're so beautiful. The problem is I'm not psychic. Does this mean that I can't use them? Joe mentioned a myth earlier that kind of circulates in our communities, and that is that you have to be gifted like tarot cards. So that's a myth. That's not true. You can absolutely go buy your own tarot cards. Another myth is that you have to be psychic to use tarot cards. Not true. The tarot cards are communicating what you know already, what you're already tapped into, your subconscious or your higher self, however you like to think of that. It's just a tool for you. They're not inherently magic. They're just a tool to let you express that part of yourself that you're not normally in touch with. So that's the answer to that question, is you do not need to be a psychic to use your pendulum or to use your tarot cards. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or to add to that?
Yeah, well, if nobody else has anything else to say, I think one thing that's helpful to think about when you're using divination, and that is tarot cards or pendulums or any even spirit boards, which you might call a Ouija board, is who are you asking the question to? And you don't need to necessarily say that out loud. You don't need to necessarily say that, as part of your working. But I think it's helpful to keep it in the back of your mind, because you might be, I work with a series of spirits that I'll say, I'll invite into and say, can you provide answers through this medium? you might be using them to contact an ancestor and say, can you speak through this and give me some answers about what I'm asking for? I think it can be problematic if you just toss it out there to the universe, because I don't think that the universe is like I don't think it works that way. And if you don't, I think there's a tendency to look at the pendulums and the runes and the tarot cards as if they're an infallible source of information. If you just lay the cards down, they will tell you all the mysteries of the universe. And I think that the counter to that is, who are you asking? You know, are you asking your higher self? Are you asking your spirit guides? Are you asking your ancestors? And also to take it with a grain of salt. You know, this isn't just because, you know, the message is coming through that you should quit your job and become a belly dancer doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best advice for you in your situation.
Yes, I agree.
I don't know if anybody's a belly dancer. It just popped into my mind. I didn't mean any disrespect to anybody who is.
No disrespect to belly dancers. We love you, belly dancers. Thank you. The other question that came in was, I don't really like crystals, but I see them everywhere, all over social media posts. Is something wrong with me? Am I witchcrafting wrong if I don't use crystals? I have not met a whole lot of people who don't like crystals, but David is actually one of those people who aren't a crystal person, and that wasn't a question from him, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not a rock guy.
So I think, you know, no, nothing's wrong with you. You're allowed to like or not like what you do and don't. There's no requirement to be a witch, and that you have to like crystals or any of the other stuff. So you're not doing anything wrong. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
My only thought on that is whoever said that doesn't like pretty shiny things. I don't think there's a requirement for it, but it sure helps, in my honest opinion. They help me with my chakra work. I know that, and it helps me, like, this helps me really bad with my anxiety ever since my pregnancy, so.
Okay, so I think the last question that we have that hasn't been asked yet, I'm double checking to make sure we didn't miss any. I don't believe, okay. I think I am a natural witch. How can I find out? All right, so I personally, and there will be contradicting information on the internet. The internet will tell you something different, but I do not believe that you can be a natural witch, just because I believe witchcraft is a practice and not part of your DNA specifically. Anybody can be a witch, and so if you do not practice, if you do not do the work, you are not doing witchcraft. And you're not born doing the work, and you're not born being a witch. You have to choose it. It's not something that just, you don't wake up one day and a fairy shows up and says, you know, you turn 16 and you know, you're a witch now. And it's not like Charmed. It's not like all of the other, you know, movies and shows out there where you get your Harry Potter letter and find out that you're actually a witch. So you have to choose it, and you have to do the work. And, you know, if you don't, I don't think that there's any room to call someone a natural witch if they haven't done those things. That doesn't mean that you maybe, you know, you could be raised in a witchy household where you were taught these things from the beginning, and that's wonderful. You can have witches in your lineage. You could have a grandmother or a mother or, and further back, who were practitioners. That's wonderful. But that in itself, in my opinion, does not make you a witch. There are plenty of people who were raised by witches, my children included, who don't necessarily choose to be witches in their lives. They were raised with these things, but they have, you know, not chosen to make this part of their practice. So I think that on its own is not what qualifies you to be a witch. So for me, I think it's not a thing. What about you guys? What are your thoughts on a natural witch?
I actually know a couple that claim to be natural witches. But their definition of being a natural witch is that they don't need to use tools. Like we've discussed, you don't need tools to be a natural witch anyways. Another thing they consider is that they are more connected to the divine. They have more control over their energy. They can take care of spirits with the snap of their fingers. Like these guys have been focusing their energy and practicing for many years that they've gotten to the point they consider themselves natural. But I agree, you have to put in the work in order to be it. So I just look at them and I think, yeah.
I love it.
I guess it matters how she looks. I mean, I don't understand how that question was asked. Like how she was asking that question, because I don't know. To me, I take that as like she considers not putting in any of the work.
Mhm.
And to me, you need to put in the work, because if you want to be a witch, you need to constantly be studying. You need to keep yourself and your mind going, because it's not something, to me, if you're going to be a witch, you need to keep your brain going, and you need to keep yourself educated, because there's constantly new stuff coming up, and you need to keep yourself educated on what's happening in the world. And if you're not doing that, then what are you doing? Just just for the hat? I mean, like, I don't understand. Like, what
Well,
was,
yeah, and
yeah.
the question too is, I think a lot of, we see a lot of people identifying as natural witch. Like Allie said, she knows some people who identify as a natural witch, and I agree. I think a lot of times that self label has a lot more to do with I don't have to do the work, or I don't have to listen to anybody who's got some
Yeah.
experience in this, and I can just make up whatever, I guess. And it is kind of sometimes I think used as an excuse not to put in the work. I think sometimes people, like Ali said, feel like those, like they have gifts that make it easier for them to connect with the divine or the spirit realm, and that makes them a natural witch. I disagree. I think we all have that connection, and it's all just a matter, and it is easier for some people than others. I don't think that makes you a natural witch. I think whether you're a witch or not, some people just have they're so a little bit more closely connected with those things. It just comes a little bit easier for them. There are plenty of people that I grew up with who are definitely not witches, who, had prophetic dreams or visions and things like that, who identify as a different religion. So I think that just as a human being, sometimes the way that we're raised or the things that we're exposed to, sometimes we develop those things or certain skills that make us a little bit more ready to interact with the spiritual side of things or with magic. The other part is that a natural witch, I think, is a little bit of like, I'm better than you. It has a little bit of that tone to it. Like I don't have to, join a coven to be a witch. I'm just already a witch kind of thing. And it's a little bit like that for me when I hear it.
Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of like the whole peace and love. Like, I only handle with the love parts and you handle with the dark stuff kind of thing, That's how I take it. Like, like I only deal with peace and love and you deal with the dark stuff kind of thing. That's how I take it. And that's, I don't know. When I hear that, it's like snooty kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it comes across a little bit holier than thou, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think sometimes when unless someone else had wanted to jump in, when I hear the term natural witch, I assume either someone's trying to be impressive, which is all the things that you two were just talking about. They're a little bit better than you. They're a little bit, I'm more in tune. Look at my awesome powers. Sometimes I hear they've been told that they're a natural witch. And we actually did a video about this in the Magic Valley Pagans about push readings. That sometimes people will lead with, oh, I can sense this wonderful energy coming off of you. I think you're a natural shaman, or I think you're a natural witch, or, you know, and the person in the store, they may be doing it intentionally, or it may be just, you know, have they figured out what they just think that they genuinely think they're doing a service, but they're handing that person their Hogwarts letter, you know, and then now the person that walked into their store feels a reciprocal obligation to buy something. And so sometimes when I hear that natural witch, I think this may be something someone was told, and they're under the impression that they don't have to work, or they don't have to do anything, or that they're better than the other people in the community. My experience in life, I kind of got the equivalent of a Hogwarts letter. I was stuck in the gifted talented program, and I can tell you that gifted thing means precisely dick. Because what really matters is the work that you put in, the effort you put in, and the work that you do. So I guess that's my 2 cents on it.
So what you really want to say to everybody is that you're a genius.
I'm only as good as the work that I put into something.
I completely agree with that part of it. Like that, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of times when I get questions, oh gosh, so many times it's because a tarot reader or psychic reader told them they were special and that they had these special gifts. You're a natural born witch. You have witches in your lineage, and they haven't verified this. They've just been told this and they believe it. And so, you know, I understand, you know, but I just want people to know, you know, don't believe everything that you get in a reading, and take it with a grain of salt. They may have sincerely believed that's what they were looking at, but your tarot cards aren't going to tell you that you're a natural witch. It just doesn't work that way. That's not the way tarot works. And so, you know, just understand that maybe at best it means that you have a special connection with the spirit world, and it's time to start working on that. It's time to start, you know, laying the groundwork for the work involved for you to develop that part of your path, just like the rest of us have to do. So, you know, if you are told something truly fantastical in a reading, that you have no way of verifying like that, you know, take it with a grain of salt, and take it as a sign that maybe this is a direction for you to start putting some of your interests and some of your research and your reading and things like that towards. But don't take it as, oh, I don't have to do anything now. I'm a magical being that's just full of light and fairy dust.
even the Charmed ones, like we watched that show Charmed, and our big gripe was that here are these women who've been told that they have these magical powers, and they never friggin' practice.
I know.
And so they always get their asses kicked when the bad guys come around, because they never friggin' practice.
And they have real magical powers. So you still have to do the work.
Or they never read the book.
Right.
Right.
I love it. Yes, just read the book, girls. Like, why you have this until it gets stolen? Have you guys seen the new one?
I haven't seen the new one. I have zero interest in it.
I love all witchy shows. I don't care how campy or stupid they are. I love them all. No matter how bad they represent real witches, it doesn't matter. I love them.
Right, they are good.
Well, does anybody have any other common questions or that have come up that we can answer for the folks that are going to be watching this?
I actually finally came up with one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so in our society today, the main religion is Christianity. And, you know, we kind of get pushed to the back burner most of the time. We don't even get considered. So my question is how do you feel about raising children to be pagan? Like, do you want to raise children to be pagan, or do you want them to hide it? Or my opinion is I want to give my children the choice. Like my daughter, she is in between worlds because her biological mother is Mormon, and then when she comes over here, she always asks me to do witchy stuff with her. And so she's kind of she's in between, and so I tell her as much as I should or as much as I can, and then her other mother teaches her the other side. So, but I'm never going to tell her, don't hide that part of you. If you get bullied for it, let me know and we'll take care of it. But never, if that is a path you want, never hide that side of you.
Mm-hmm.
I did, and well, I kind of hid it, and I got teased for it in school, and my mother was Mormon, so she didn't stand up for me. So
Joe, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. There's, I don't know, I'm going to give you a very lawyer answer. It depends. I think that just based on my upbringing and my husband's upbringing, we want our children to experience all of them, and I'm going to encourage them to, take a comparative religion course and understand all of them, because you're never going to understand, my human nature and our history if you don't understand the context that a lot of them are in. So I want them to learn all of it, but I also want to give them the choice that I wasn't given. I want them to be open to every safe experience that they can have growing up. And then by the time their brains are fully developed after 25, maybe they will have the tools and the maturity and the confidence in themselves to choose the path that they want to go down. I would probably have some things to say if they chose the choice I wasn't given. But my goal right now is just to have them experience everything they can, and then have the tools and the maturity to choose on their own when they get older.
Thank you. I think for raising kids, our kids are grown now, so they were all raised in paganism and witchcraft. Of course, they also had influences from like their grandparents or their other side of the family who had other kind of beliefs and stuff. I'm a proponent of giving kids the freedom to choose, because I felt like I didn't have that when I grew up. It was this or nothing. It's this or the devil. That was it. So I always raised my kids. I felt like I didn't want them to be indoctrinated by another religion. So the way to inoculate them from that was to educate them on all the other religions, not just my views and my beliefs. So when I presented it to them, it was, this is what mommy believes. And, you're welcome to ask questions or participate, but it was never a requirement. They all practiced paganism or witchcraft at some point, but they all just kind of learned to do their own thing. So to this day, I feel like they are fully inoculated against organized religion, which was my goal. So I feel good about it. I think one of my daughters is atheist. She leans more atheist. The other one's pretty agnostic, and the other one is leaning pagan-ish. And then my son is pagan. He identifies as pagan. So, it's really up to them, in my opinion. And they're, I made, like pagan kid-friendly kind of things for them when they were little. I read them books, but I didn't make it just like where they had to only interact with my religious beliefs. So we had lots of books about like Buddhism or about Native American beliefs, which is part of our family. And even Christianity. I wanted them to learn about Christianity from me and not when they went to church with their little friends. So that they weren't susceptible to believing really what they were listening to, but so they could critically think through what they were, listening to when they went to church. So that was kind of my way of doing it. And then just, when you get old enough, you can choose for yourself. I'm not going to choose for you. And I hated when they wanted to go to church with their friends. Oh my God, I hated it. But I had to be like, oh, sure, cool. I'm a cool mom. I can handle that. And, the way I got around it was just, let's talk about it when you get home, and just talk to them about, what did you learn today and what did they talk about? So that just like you would with like TV shows or things that might be controversial. So you're the influencer in their life, not the other stuff. And that's kind of how I handled it. And I feel like it turned out okay. None of them, as far as I know, are like devout Christians, and I feel like that's a win for me. But I think that they figured out how not to believe everything they're told, and I think that was the biggest thing I wanted them to take away from it. Yeah. And they can be friends with, and well, I will say this, Allie, because I know you have little ones, and you've got little Johnny, Angie, like. I remember when the girls were, all girls go through like a witch phase, no matter what religion they come from, but it seems like, but when my girls were probably around maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10, somewhere in that, maybe late elementary school, I remember them trying to recruit the local kids for like their coven. I remember the girls coming to our house and wanting to like read my books and things like that. And my rule in my house was only if your parents say it's okay. So I felt like it was my job as a parent to respect how their families were raising them and not try to undermine that deliberately. And so even though they were very curious about my things, I wanted the parents to still understand what I didn't want their parents to, because when parents find out their kids are like involved in witchcraft, they do crazy shit. They can like abuse their children or who knows what. So I never wanted that to be an issue. So yes, you can read my books or you can do these things. And I didn't take it upon myself to try to teach anybody else's children about my beliefs. If you want to come over my house and read my books, that's totally fine if your parents say it's okay. And most were pretty cool about it, because this was when we lived in Seattle and people were pretty progressive about things. I don't think I ever had a parent who was like, oh no, witchcraft. So everybody was pretty cool. But that was kind of where I set my boundaries for kind of like, these are my kids and I have control over what they learn about, but I'm not going to take responsibility or ownership for what your kid learns about. If they want to come to my house and learn these things, you need to give permission kind of stuff. But I'm not going to like actively teach them. If they want to pick up my books in my house and read them, I'm not going to stop them if you say that's fine. Yeah. So that's kind of where we ended up. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
I'd say it did. I liked most of that. You got me some advice for when the girls get a little older. Like, for the most part, I don't have to worry about that with my oldest, just because I don't have her all the time, and she's not allowed to talk about that about anything that goes over here, over there, and that's just their rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that being challenging when the girls were little, like kindergarten, first grade, they'd go to school, my mommy's a witch. And the teachers would say it to me like, oh, they meant to say something else. I'm like, no, I'm a witch. Like, I was out. I wasn't trying to hide it. But I remember having to talk to the girls like, you might not need to say that as openly, not because I was worried about me, but I didn't want them to have problems at school, either with their teachers or with other kids. So I just think over time, they just learned how to be discerning about who they shared that with. And they, luckily, again, they grew up in a really progressive, liberal kind of area where it was very diverse and people were just accepting. So they had tons of friends who were just as diverse as they were, and it never seemed to be an issue for them. But here in this state might be a whole different experience for kids. My son he didn't go to school here till the 7th grade. So, you know, he was certainly old enough to be able to fend for himself for the most part when it came to those things. Little kids it's a different story. And here, you know, there's a lot of bullying and things like that I think you have to be mindful of.
See, and I've already had issues with Johnny coming out and telling people my mom's a witch. And Johnny had a teacher that was very Christian and that was on the board of the preschool that I was teaching at. And I was like, oh my gosh. And, you know, I was very lucky that he liked me, but I had to be like, okay, yes, I am a witch. And this kid just outed me. Okay. And I was like, okay, yes, I am a witch. And there's my kid that just told his whole classroom that his mom's a witch. And he did get bullied for it. And a lot of the parents in his classroom thought that I was worshiping the devil. And so a lot of the parents did not want the kids to be playing with him because they felt that I was worshiping the devil. So I had to explain to the other parents that no, that's not what I do. And I had to explain what I believe to the other parents as I'm making these phone calls. And it sucks, but that's because we live in a small town. And so to make them feel comfortable, I had to explain, okay, this is what I believe in. And to make it comfortable for him. And once I explained it, they're like, oh, okay, you know, paganism isn't worshiping the devil. And I understand that that's how that's information that you're getting. No, that's not what it is. And once I broke it down for them and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And I'm like, you know, my kid's okay. He doesn't, you know, worship the devil. Everything's good now, you know. And once I broke it down, and I was like, and I'm not going to be allowing your kids any information, giving them any information or anything. You know, in their minds, I was going to be handing out information to their children.
Right, like
you know, and
Baphomet or something.
Right. Like I was going to be right. Like I was going, yeah, like I was going to be going to the school, handing them information, and here, come to my coven meeting. You know, really, like, no, sorry. You know, but for my child, you know, he looks at it like my mom takes him to Catholic Mass, and that's hard for me because at first I was okay with it, but now my mom and my sisters are, oh, you know, that's really scary that your mom, you know, the devil's tricking her. And I'm like, great, thanks, you know. And so my son looks at it as, well, I'm pagan too, just like my mom, and I want my son to be able to choose when he is old enough to choose, you know. And I don't feel like he should have to be confused, you know. If he wants to go to church with his grandma, then he should be able to go to church with his grandma. But I don't want him to feel like mom is being tricked by the devil, you know. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. And I think I'm old enough to be okay, you know. Thank you for your concerns, but I'm good, you know. And I've gotten in that conversation with my family many times. If I want to have tea with the devil, let me have tea with the devil. And that is exactly how I put it. If I want to have tea with the devil, that's my business, you know, because there's no other way to put it. I've tried to have an educated conversation, and you can't. And a lot of times it's very hard to have an educated conversation with people that are very close-minded, especially with religion, you know, and the best way is all you can do is raise your children the best way that you know how, and try to show them. And you know, Johnny will kneel with me, sit with me next to my altar, and he will talk to his papa while I'm doing my thing. And he'll come in here in the mornings and he'll close my closet door, and I'll be like, what are you doing? Oh, I got to talk to my papa. Oh, okay, you talk to your papa, you know, and that's his thing in the morning, you know, and I'm okay with that, you know, and he feels that he's Catholic and he's also pagan. You do your thing, baby. You do your thing. Until he's old enough to really figure out that whole religious thing, then I'm good with whatever he wants to call himself. You know, he's still little,
Yeah.
you know, but until I want to be able to give my son all religions. I want him to take a class when he's old enough and just dive into everything when he's old enough. You know, I think that's really important.
Thank you, Angie. I like that. How about you, Joe? How do you handle it?
Right. So far, it hasn't been too much of an issue. My kids are still pretty young, and we've been open with them about everything. Like I said before, my goal right now is just kind of to let them teach them to think for themselves and think critically. I think that's something that's missing in a lot of education, is being able to look at something and be allowed to think critically of it. Critically, not meaning bad, but analyze it. And so that's more my goal, is to give them the experiences and resources that they can think critically for themselves, and then when they get older, be able to make those decisions for themselves without the fear that was kind of scared into us. Like, if you don't do this, you will never see your family again. If you don't do it my way, you will be in hell. If you don't do it my way, you will never see your papa again. So I want to raise them without that fear, and with the knowledge that they can make the choices when they're older.
I think another component too that's tricky and difficult is, you know, I always feel like teaching children to keep secrets is not healthy for them. And it's very difficult for young children because on one hand, there are situations like Angie was talking about, like in her workplace, where it would not be necessarily safe for her to be outed. And so sometimes, and even for our children, for them to out themselves in a group of people where they might be treated differently, like at school, you know, how do we make that decision about telling them, okay, this is something that only our family talks about, we don't talk about it outside of our family, without teaching them that secret keeping is okay, because we want them to tell us things, and we don't want them to keep secrets from us. And that's just a tricky part of it. And I tried really hard not to ever tell my kids that they had to keep mommy secrets. You know, if I didn't want them to tell anybody else, then I should not be telling them. I should be keeping it secret. Kids are gonna talk. They're gonna tell people. And I just feel like it's not fair for us to ask them to keep our secrets for us. because they can't distinguish between good secrets and bad secrets when they're young. And if we teach them to sometimes keeping secrets is okay, they can be manipulated by, let's say, a predator to keep secrets in other situations. So I feel like we don't want to set our kids up to condition them for keeping secrets, in that kind of way, if that makes sense. But again, it's a tricky thing. How do we openly practice and be ourselves with our family members without having our kids keep secrets? So obviously it has to be a personal decision for each family how you handle it. But I just would ask families in general to keep that in mind about the effects that it might have on a child to keep a secret in general, because they really don't know the difference between good secrets and bad secrets yet, especially like under the age of 8 or 9. Their brains just developmentally, they can't distinguish those things. So if you're not ready to be out as a pagan or as a witch, it might be prudent to consider not having that be an open part of your life with your children until they're older, or to consider how you might handle that if they do out you. So that would be my last little bit about that. All right, well, does anybody have any other questions that they want to add to our panel discussion? When we do this, we are going to have a secondary live Q&A for people. So when they watch this, then we're going to follow that up with a live Q&A for anybody who has additional questions that we can answer. Hopefully this helps answer a lot of people's common questions. Is there any other ones that we can do before we close? I did have one thing to add on one of the earlier questions that we had. I think Allie mentioned it. It was something about, like, what if someone comes to you and they practice another religion and they think they've been cursed, or they need you to do a spell for them? She made a really good point, and I think it's important to say, I do the same thing that she was talking about. If someone from a different religion comes to me and asks me for my witch help, if they say, I don't believe, they do this too, they start off, I don't believe in this stuff, but I feel like a curse has been placed upon me, and can you help take it off? First of all, the answer is no, I will not help you take the curse off. Second, what does your religion recommend you do? Because if you don't believe in this stuff, if you're, whatever your religion is, I would say consult with your religious leader on the matter. Because whatever I'm going to tell you isn't really going to help you, because what I'm going to tell you is based on the belief system of what I practice. And if that's not your belief system too, then it's probably not going to be very helpful. So I think if someone's coming to you or talking to you about those things and they're practicing a different religion, they might just be better served talking to their pastor or their priest or their religious person, looking for guidance within their own religion and how to remove a hex or a curse or deal with something like that. That was my only thing that I forgot to mention. Anything else?
Sorry, I just want to add, most of the time when they're coming to us, that's because their religion has turned them away. So that's why they're coming to us pagans, because their religion has turned them away, and they have nowhere else to turn. So yeah, let's go to the crazy pagans, because the crazy pagans will believe us.
there's a long tradition of the witch or the shaman kind of being at the edge of the village, and that's because they're not really fully included with the normal stuff. They're half here, but they're also half in the spirit world. And I think it's natural for people to reach out and say, gosh, I had this really wacko thing happen and I don't know what to do about it, or I don't know what to, and to reach out. But I think that the Solaris's point is really well taken to say, there are people that we can help within the framework of our practice. People that we work with, or people that share our beliefs, that where the stories and the myths that we use will help and will work. And there are other times where we need to redirect and say, this is not really something that I can help you with, or this is not something I'm willing to help you with. I mean, I could, but I don't feel like this is really my sphere to get involved in.
Yeah, it's okay to tell people no. You know, you're not obligated just because you're a spiritual worker or a witch or whatever, however you identify. You are under no obligation to say yes to people. You're not the town witch or the town healer. You don't have to take ownership or responsibility to solve their problems or to grant their wishes. You know, this is not the role that you have to take on for yourself unless you choose to. I think it's important to set boundaries. And like David said, you know, sometimes, you know, you can help. Sometimes you have to say, no, we need to redirect this. For me, if you just don't believe in any of this, I'm not helping you. And it's not even because I think you're a jerk, but mostly because sincerely, what I have to say to you is for people who at least believe that they have the power to change what the situation is. If you've put all of your faith in some other, you know, construct, whether that's a deity or religion or whatever, me telling you that you are fully empowered to remove this curse yourself, and I'm going to tell you how to do it, won't help you. You're looking for an authority figure to do it for you, and that's not the advice I'm going to give you. I'm going to tell you how you personally are empowered to fix this problem by yourself. So some people are ready to hear that, and some people aren't, and you just have to learn to decide which one is which for yourself.
That's really well said.
All right, so that is going to wrap up our Pagan Fest Ask the Witches segment. We will be doing a follow-up question Q&A that's going to be live after this. So stick around and feel free to put your questions in the comments. We'll answer them as best we can. Thanks everybody for joining us. Bye.
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 Bye, Allie. Thank you. Bye, Joe. Thanks, Angie.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.